Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May peace be upon all of you, my fellow learners, ladies, gentlemen, professionals, and students. Today, in this video, we're going to focus on why is productivity content counterproductive. Before we really talk about counterproductivity of so-called content, let's try and understand what productivity means. So, as you know, it's a simple idea. Productivity, in one way of defining it, can mean doing more with less. Right? It could be less time or it could be less resources. So if you can achieve more output with less resources, you can call yourself productive. Another way of interpreting productivity sometimes could be in the corporate setting, it could be in a competitive setting, is when you are able to produce more output than your peers. So, for example, if you're working in a company and you're producing certain financial statements as an analyst, for example, I used to work as an analyst. So there are people who can produce a financial statement in 1 hour as opposed to people who can produce the same statement in 1 day. So you call that person who can get the job done faster a more productive person. So simply, you have to understand that you are productive if you are economical with your resources, if you are efficient with the way you deliver with your actions, but in being so, if you are able to ensure that you are effective, you get the job done. Because if the action is ineffective, if you don't really achieve what you set out to achieve, if you don't achieve your objective, then productivity, however productive you are, doesn't really matter. So doing more with less is what productivity means. So why exactly am I talking about counterproductivity of productivity content? What exactly is productivity content? One of the most primary forms of productivity content that we see is content on YouTube. So these are some of the most famous and most popular YouTubers who are operating heavily in the productivity space of YouTube. This is Ali Abdal, Thomas Frank, Matt Diavela, Robin Sharma. Some of you might know him from his very famous book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. Sadhguru talks a lot about productivity, and even Captain Sinbad, one of my favorite, especially in his visual content. Jay Shetty. Right? So these people, they talk about productivity a lot. There's a lot of content out there that is very useful, very helpful. It has helped countless people. And I've spent a lot of time. I'm a big fan of all of these gentlemen. Then what exactly is the issue here? I say that before you really think about introducing these productivity habits of all these authors and all these videos, all these content producers, all these YouTubers, we have to take a step backward and we have to think about the idea of being productive. And if being productive is doing more with less, we have to start thinking about doing more of what with less of what. And doing more of what means what we want. What is our objective? What is our vision? What is our mission of life? What is our purpose of life? With less of what? Really, what are the resources we have? How much time do we have? How much education do we have? How much knowledge do we have? What are our capabilities? What are our skills? In addition to these two, you also need to very closely think about your personal circumstances. My idea is that because this is how I started thinking, because I tried so hard to inculcate these productivity habits into my life, it did not work until I figured out these things, until I figured out my purpose of life, until I figured out what condition am I operating in, until I figured out what resources are available at my disposal. Then things started to become clear. That is what I'm sharing with you. What we want and what we have are affected significantly by several factors, like our upbringing and mindset, our environment and community, our values and our principles, and the infrastructure and the conditions we live in. That is very important. And it's something that I struggle with, being stationed in Asia, in Sri Lanka, in this particular economy, with this particular monetary and fiscal policy I operate, and I am at a significant disadvantage as opposed to some of the developed nations. And if you take, for example, you just log into Amazon and just check, certain gear, the shipping cost to Sri Lanka is 5 times greater than the cost of the product itself. There are certain books I can't find locally. So even the infrastructure, the factor conditions, and the conditions we live in are a big element. And we have to think about our personal circumstances also. When you really take a close look at these things, what you're figuring out is who you are and what you want, who you want to become. That is very important today. Extremely important in today's world. Our identity, who we are, what are we supposed to do for ourselves, for our families, for our communities, for the world. Figuring that out is more important than ever before. This is why the most positive sentiment of productivity, that is, if you log into some of these websites, you look at the authors, the books, and the feedback, what you will see is the sentiment is coming from people who have a clear purpose. The testimonials are provided by CEOs, best-selling authors, giants of their crafts, because they have a purpose. When you have a purpose, these productivity tips, the productivity content helps. Actually, when I figured out my purpose, I started using some of these tactics and some of these tools. They became useful. When I didn't have one, before I figured out my purpose, when I was lost in my life, they were useless. I was doing for the sake of doing. I was watching for the sake of watching. I was writing for the sake of writing. It wasn't really taking me anywhere. And the productivity tips don't help at all, because your mindset is not clear. It's not crystal clear. When you have a vision, when you have a purpose, it's so clear what you want to do, where you want to be, what you want to achieve, that all these things start suddenly becoming very useful. First and foremost, remember, before you force yourself to inculcate these productivity habits, figure out your purpose, your resources, what you have, and your circumstances. Take a deep look, a very close look about these things. That will lead you to identifying who you are, what exactly is your identity. And please make sure that you're realistic when you do this, that you stay grounded. Do not try to benchmark yourself. Do not try to outsmart another person. Do not try to be unnecessarily competitive. Focus inward. Focus about yourself. Focus about being better. Focus about what those particular factors I touched on earlier are. And then you have my permission to die. Oh, sorry. I don't know where that came from. Then you can start thinking about productivity. On that note, all the very best. May this video help you, and may peace be upon all of you and your loved ones. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you very much, my fellow brothers, sisters, and learners.